So yeah, today we're talking about chapter 16, the kind of the wrap up of the object-oriented programming section, um, called trade-offs. And really, there are two main objectives in here because he had talked about S3 versus S4 a bit in the S4 chapter. So he doesn't go into a lot of S3 versus S4 here, but we have a little bit, and I'm going to do a little bit of talk about S7 as well in each of these. And then once we have that S3 versus S4 discussion, we'll go into R6 versus S3, and again, throwing in some S7. And then I think we're going to have a lot of kind of discussion of, um, when you would use each. And we'll see how it goes. Also, might just be a quick week. And if so, that's not the end of the world. Okay. So the first piece of advice he had, and I tried to get a follow up on this, no reply yet, but he says that he recommends that you default to S3. Um, it is really easy to create S3 methods. It is very widely used. Um, and kind of the opposite, that if you come from some language other than R, you'll look at R6 and say, oh, yeah, that's what OOP looks like. And you'll make things that are really hard for R users to use in a lot of cases because it won't work like any or like most other R code. Um, and yeah, that there's a link on this slide to the post on Blue Sky where I tried to tag him and see what he thinks. I still would default to S3. I still do default to S3. It's just it's so easy and it's so it plugs in nice with everything else. That said, I'm like trying to get in the habit of doing like mixing in S7 more often because it is better. Like it's cleaner. Um it's clearer. It has better print methods. It has like it just defaults to better. But it feels like more work. Now, I think a lot of that's because I haven't used it that much yet. Um, but the nice thing is, if you kind of mix your default of S3 and S7, they play together really nice. And so it doesn't hurt to mix in some S7. Uh, the next like piece of advice he has is to use S4 for large team projects. And this one has the biggest asterisk because I am pretty certain he would say, or S7 unless it's already established with S4. Like if you're starting something new and it's something that you're going to have classes to keep track of, and you're going to have, um, you know, rotating teams coming through, and you don't want to have to teach everyone how to be careful about your classes, S4 or S7 like establishes the classes, and so people don't really have to be careful about them. They just like they're defined. It does require a lot more upfront work than S3. You can really easily just like, like I said, just create a method. To create an S3 method, you just put a period and then the name of the class. Like it's super easy to do that. Um, but S4 is more formal, more strict, and more verbose. And the structure from S4 reduces risk from new team members because, again, they can't screw things up as much. Bioconductor, I think he said it was like 1,500 when he wrote the book. It's around 3 or 4,000 right now. I wasn't sure how much things are double counted, but lots of packages. And he talked about the matrix package. I didn't actually click through and dig in to see if there are more classes, generics, and or methods yet. But it's about that same. But the drawback, and this also kind of applies to S7, is both of these could use a book of how to work with them in art. And there's a lot of training for bioconductor specifically. But I did a little bit of looking and I still couldn't find like an S4 a, uh, non-bioconductor specific S4 book, um, or anything along those lines. And S7 is just too new for that. They do have a lot of vignettes in S7, but it worked out to be about equivalent to one of these chapters, not to a book. Um, so there's that. No, there isn't an S3 book either, but it's just so simple that you don't need one. Like the chapter covers pretty much everything you can learn about S3. You look like you want to say something, Nick, and I'm going to let you do that because I have to go let my dog in.
All right,
So
so
I'll be right
yeah.
back.
Now I'm just thinking again because S7 does seem like you would get more for free, quote unquote. Which would be nice. Like maybe you get more type safety, maybe you get nicer printing, whatever it is. I come from, yeah, I'll use it in my interactive code, but I really want to make it available through packages or tools that I make for my team or whoever. Um, uh, is there, do I have to like depend on a seven? Does it need to be loaded initially when I make a package? Like, do you know? Because right now that's three.
Oh,
That's a baked in the base or the packages that's like almost like close in namespace. You know what I mean?
you need to have S7 installed. And so if you're putting it into a package, you need to add it as a dependency. So you used to need a thing in um, the onload of the package. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think as long as they're using R like 4.4 or greater, something like that, I think like R automatically is preparing for S7 now, I think. But there is a whole vignette in S7 in the S7 docs about using it in packages, and that kind of goes through how to make it work. But you would need, at some point, uh, you need to have it installed, and something will need to kind of um, use it. Like so, when you're using it in your package or you're using it in your functions, that will be enough to kind of activate it. Um, so you don't need your users to library it, but they need to have it installed.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
All right. Let me see the next one. Um, so like this next one, the next couple of slides come from the R6 section that if you want to just use off the shelf easily things like summary, plot, predict, technically print, but everything has print methods, so that's no big deal. Um, S3 is really nice for that. It's really easy to create your own classes and methods to kind of link into all these things that already exist. And that's a very, very short list of the many things that have existing S3 generics. And so adding your own method onto them is really easy, relatively speaking. But kind of at the same time, R6, so the advantage of S3 is that it's generic and you've got all these things that just kind of already exist. The advantage of R6 is it's not generic and anything you defined is defined in the object. And so there's like less surprise, less worry about collision because the method is contained in the object. It can have different arguments than the standard methods or than the generic knows about because you're not using a generic, you're using just your method. Um, and so, yeah, you can have your own methods that, he had the example of like plotting a bank heist versus plotting a graph. And the word plot there means very different things. And so if your R6 uses the word plot to mean something else, that's fine because the method is contained in the object. But all that said, he didn't really talk about this, but R6 objects are S3 objects. Like they have S3 classes that are the name of the R6 class plus R6 or R6 object, something like that. So you can actually mix and match, um, which can be interesting. Like, uh, I think like we might talk about that a little bit more towards the end, but the times I've worked with R6, I usually end up wrapping it in something that looks more R like. I don't think I can't remember ever really taking advantage of the fact that R6 objects are S3 objects, that you could
Mm.
like make it look completely R like normal R like um to users, but have this R6 object that is actually being passed around and does the main nice thing being that the object is stateful. So if you have a reason to care about states, if that the thing changes as you're working with it, that's when R6 is really um, helpful. The R6 methods can modify the object state, and so I put R6 methods can modify object state, but really, like any function that gets the R6 object can modify that object. That can be confusing if you're used to normal R objects, but it also can be really powerful. And so you don't have to like keep passing the parent object on to the next step in a function. Like it by the fact that it is that you call a method on it, then it uh, gets passed on. Even the updated version gets passed on. And the neat or I don't know, interesting thing you can do with that is that the dollar sign becomes a pipe for R6 that you can, as long as you write your methods the way that you're supposed to, where you're, uh, well, actually, it doesn't matter that much anyway. But the point is that you can just like keep passing these or adding these pipes on or these dollar signs on to do different steps. You'll see that, or I have seen that a lot in like JavaScript, or if you've worked with Python, you'll see that kind of thing. And so that makes it act more like other programming languages.
Mm.
Um,
I mean, I can
and
convince myself not to use R6 when that's too, but I can see it being really handy for like in Shiny when like reactive things happen all the time and you want there to be a consistent thing, that updates as needed. But I mean, you also need a trigger when things update and so on.
it is interesting because like even within Shiny, they also use just more normal R environments to store like what is active, like what is the object that is that everything is happening inside of. Um, because you use that to figure out like dependencies and all that kind of stuff. And so um it like anytime you would use R6, you mostly can just use an R environment, but then again, anytime you would use an R environment, or most of those times you can use R6. And R6 does come with some nice um, customizations onto environments. So, um, and that's the kind of the breakdown. But the previous cohort made this nice table that I cleaned up a little bit that I have not seen anywhere else. And so it's kind of nice to just have this is all of the S or the object oriented programming systems in R. So you can kind of see how to find them, what type they are. There's a little bit of a like hand wavy complexity, but I, I would say a seven probably isn't quite as complicated as S4, just because S4 has the weird like multiple inheritance stuff.
Mhm.
Um, like yeah, and I don't know that S7 necessarily requires a large team. I left that as it was, and um, you can still be useful with a small team. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of the breakdown of how they all work. It was funny, like I updated like create class doesn't really exist for S3. Like a lot of times there'll be a function equivalent to character or integer or that kind of thing for S3 classes. Um, but there doesn't have to be. The way you create a class is you assign that class to something, and voila, that class exists. Like it doesn't need any infrastructure at all. Um, which is again both uh nice and bad.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, that's this chapter, and that's this section, I guess, of the book. Um, I have personally used S3 a lot. Uh, used S7 a tiny bit. I've used R6 mostly via Shiny. Um, and I guess I did some with the Torch package actually has something that he called R7 in that, which is just R6 with some uh, little add-ons to it. Um, which was really interesting because at first S7 was called R7, and it was very confusing because there was an R7 in Torch and there was an R7 that was, functional, not encapsulated, and that's part of why they changed it. Uh, which, like, it's really funny to have S there because S3 and S4 refer to the version of S where they were introduced, but they're in the R programming language, and S7 has nothing to do with the S language. It's just that it's S3 plus S4.
So
Um,
fun. I like sort of remember, maybe I'm remembering wrong. I thought Hadley gave a talk at Deposit Conf, maybe 23. Yeah, the one in
I think
DC. I thought he introduced it as R7.
very, very possible. Yeah, I think that was 22.
Oh man.
Um, yeah, he gave an S7 or R7 talk a few times. Like I think USR 2023 maybe he had a S7 talk. Um, and so those are like if you're really getting into S7, it is useful to watch those, except uh last year they did a lot to kind of refine it and clean it up and make it work better. And I don't think I think his talks aren't quite about the final thing that S7 became, but it's close. It's close enough to get started, or the intro that we did here. Um, yeah, I want to get in the habit of using it more. I think I think it is um probably where things are going to land, but it is definitely the XKCD of, oh, we have too many OOP systems. We need one that unifies them. And so now we have just one more OOP system. And someday maybe we'll have, S14 that combines all the features of S7, S3, and S4 because S7 won't quite meet that goal. Or or R13, RS13, I don't know. Which you can't, like, people were like, oh, is S7 going to replace R6? Not really, because it's different. Like it's a different goal. Um, it is functional, not uh encapsulated, and that makes it very different. Um, R6, like when I've had reason to work with R6, like there's a learning curve, but then it is really nice. Like it's useful when it's useful. I guess is what I would say. Like, like the shiny examples, lots of web stuff when you're gonna be like you want the thing as it is right now, regardless of what it was when you grabbed it. That sort of thing. And so the R6 object can kind of just be built to uh, go fetch things. Something that I didn't get into in here, but with the calculated properties in S7, you can kind of have some encapsulation. Um, and actually, like I'm sure with environments, you could turn S7 into an encapsulated uh, OOP system. but like you can have a property that calculates um, when you uh, get it, when you access it with the at, and therefore um, could act kind of encapsulated. And actually, you could have R6 objects as properties on S7 objects, which would be really interesting. Um, it's just it. You definitely need to kind of keep track of what you're working with, because otherwise you'll be very surprised when you change a copy of an object and you realize, oh no, you changed that object for everything everywhere, um, because it is writing to the original one. It's not, even if it has like five names in different places, it's still affecting the original one. Um,
What I kind of like about R6, probably not. Hopefully, I like how like everything is within it. So when you look at the package namespace, like usually a lot of packages have so many functions, and I like
yeah.
R6 like, oh, there's like two objects. I just had to worry about using those, and
Yeah, but then it becomes like harder to find the help for things, or harder to explore and see what's going to happen. Like if it's done well, there's documentation of all the methods inside of the documentation of the class, but not always. And so like, yeah, it can go both ways on that.
yeah,
Um, Once you have your object, usually you can just $sign and see what you can do with it.
yeah,
Like, that is kind of nice that
yeah.
the available methods come along with the object.
Yeah.
Um, so
And I also kind of like the like the differentiating public and private like methods. Like I've used it where I had methods in private, and then I'm like I'm experimenting with it. I'm like, oh, change out this like method, and try this out, and if I don't like it, okay, we'll revert to the other one, and blah blah blah. But the user doesn't see any of that. And so like when I'm deploying things. Then they'll use what's last deployed. Don't have to worry about the logic that I don't know.
yeah, um, that actually realizing, I think I had forgotten about like calculated and dynamic properties in S7 until I was preparing the stuff for a couple weeks ago. That S7 can have that same kind of idea effectively. That um, the the property you present to the user can be calculated from something that maybe is stored in an environment or whatever. Like, so you can do things of having components of your object that are kind of hidden versus materialized. Um, you can also uh, like you could have a I think you could make a property that the getter returns null, something like that, but still be able to directly change it from within code. I think I'll have to play around with that a little bit. Um, I don't know, probably not. So yeah, I think S7 objects. I can't remember if they're lists under the hood or like what they actually are. Um, or if everything is stored in attributes. I can't remember for sure which it is. Um, and that is a thing about R. Like even R6, private's not really private. It's just hidden. Like a private method is harder to access, but it's because it's not at the core of R to have such a concept as a private method. You can access it if you dig it enough into the object.
Yeah.
And know what you're looking for. And it's not that hard to know what you're looking for because all the functions are available, including unexported functions and packages and all that kind of stuff. So um, it's always possible to break things, and so that is something like um, certain levels of validation, like I think at some point you have to just accept that a user who broke the thing won't be too surprised when it's broken. Like I took this R6 object and changed the value of one of its private fields, and now it doesn't work as I'd expect it to work. It's like, yeah, because you broke it. So don't do that. Let's use the methods that are exported or that are whatever non-private. So yeah, that's all I have for this one. It's good to go through these every once in a while, especially see what has changed in when we dig into the actual like some there was I think some code um maybe I don't remember there are times when you'll go to run the code as written in the book and it doesn't work because that's not how it works anymore. That's less so for S3 and S4, but definitely for our R6 that can happen. Um, and even some pieces in S3 or S4. So, well, let me go ahead and stop sharing. So yeah, oops. Does anyone have any other thoughts or comments or questions about this? Not, it doesn't bother me for this to be a short one. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
sounds good.
there's more, and I encourage everyone to go play with S7 if you have any reason to do any OOP exploration. I think I was a little bit iffy on it in the actual week where I talked about it, but the more I kind of dig into it, um, if you're doing things that are at all complicated, I think you quickly make like S7 quickly becomes useful. If you are if you're just doing some basic things, you just want to have a nice print method for some object that you're making, S3 is probably fine, but it doesn't take long for S7. And I have a package that has a whole bunch of S3 in it right now that I'm like, I probably need to upgrade that at some point. I just did all this S3 work, so we'll see. So, all right, I'm going to type and